Welcome back to the latest edition of My Health Journey. I am Dr. Beau Beard. This is the Dr. Beau Show, and this is My Health Journey number 5. Today, I'll be talking about should be living my best life. Those years from probably 2018. I'm going to go up to when we had our daughter Maddox, when I just took a deep dive into, love or hate the term, biohacking and trying to optimize what I could and gaining as much information and knowledge and experience in the realm of, let's just say, health optimization. Because my day job, right, when I'm not, dad and all those other things, is a chiropractor. So even though I'm taking care of people's health, and I feel like I lean heavily on a functional medicine approach or a holistic approach to conservative musculoskeletal care and health management, I'm definitely known for a muscles, bones, fix my injury guy. So I was getting very heavy into, the Gen Pop info coming from podcasts, everybody from Ben Greenfield, Peter Tia, pick your biohacking wannabe during that time period, but also just doing a bunch of reading on my own, testing things, taking classes, toying around with things like most people would in this realm. So like I said, this was, if you look at my blood work chart, I'm looking at how many times my blood work was done, because I've went all the way up till 2017. But I had blood results received February 14th and 19th, June 11th and 19, October 30th of 19, and November 7th of 19, and then kind of waned off a bit with getting into full on pregnancy with Sloan, and then obviously having our daughter, and just other things became a higher priority, which your health should always be the biggest priority. And that's part of why I'm doing this, My Health Journey, is to kind of elucidate that anybody, even, when it is your profession, it's your job, can kind of lose sight of things. But it's not always about being perfect, and balance does not exist, in my opinion. It's ebbs and flows. But one of the things that should remain a constant is your health. It's going to be, in particular with me, having faced issues that are maybe a little harder to pin down, the focus is going to change from time to time. So if I just look at some of these labs, just to jump off with this, it looks like in 2019 in February, my liver enzymes were a bit off, but for the entire rest of the year, liver enzymes cleared up. So it was kind of interesting, which I was doing a lot of breath work, meditation, mindfulness. I'll talk about all that here in a second. Things that did start to falter more was white blood cell count. So my overall white blood cell count got down at one point to 2.6, which, talking with my functional medicine doc through Wild Health, which I'll talk about in an upcoming podcast, is who I'm using now to kind of help me on this journey. Talking about not being too drastically worried about total white blood cell count until it drops below 1.5, and then maybe pulling the trigger on other things. But still, across those 4 tests, it averaged, if I'm doing the quick math, looks like 2.9, which is not awesome. With that always being a neutropenia, in essence, with absolute neutrophils and lymphocytes being somewhat decreased in that entire time period. So maybe I got sick, and that was just a prolonged, or some of the thoughts nowadays with like the kick up and something like a dormant Epstein-Barr virus, when you get smacked in the face with something, and is what it is. This is also pre-COVID. Take your thoughts on that, but so we don't have that variable thrown into it. But during this time, I was doing everything you could possibly think of, all the way to where my functional medicine practitioner was like, holy cow, I can't believe you're doing that, all the way to like coffee enemas, and Wim Hof workshops. I was doing a daily, sometimes twice a day meditation. I was teaching breath work to people in a class that I called Aether, which was just a go-between between like the rehab part of breathing and then the performance side of breathing. What else was I doing? Still training for a variety of things. Iron Tribe, CrossFit, we'll call it. Still a big part of my life. Running, as always. just a lot of stuff going on, clean the diet up. Well, the other part of my health journey during this time becomes very tied into Sloan, my wife's health journey, because this is when we were starting to try to get pregnant, trying to have a kid, and we were not succeeding. And so Sloan, coming off of some of her past history, she was a collegiate gymnast. So there's a big environmental scenario around that with maybe undernutrition or overtraining, whatever you want to call it. Tends to be very hard. And it's just an early training age with the load, where a lot of girls are amenorrheic or at least dysmenorrheic. And she was definitely one of those. And then you add in birth control at an early age to those things. And pretty soon, the female hormone cycle is kind of thrown for a loop. Now I don't want to throw too much information out there, but I'm sure she wouldn't mind me sharing, because this is a health podcast for health practitioners. Her cycles were normal, but painful. And that's one thing that we knew going into this. So she always kind of questioned, would she ever have issues? What we kind of started to see though was, we weren't having success, but actually we had, 2 separate miscarriages at a very early stage, which was really hard for Sloan from a mental standpoint, myself as well. But, that just kind of got us thinking, what else do we need to do? So we had done all the things that we thought we needed to do, to the point of trying extremes, where Sloan had also post grad school done bikini competitions. So she, very unhealthy weight scenario and how it's going to affect her endocrine system, and then got heavy into the performance side of CrossFit. So she literally took her endocrine system for a ride for, the better part of 2 decades. And then you want to have a kid. We shouldn't expect that you're not going to have a challenge. But she was doing everything she went vegetarian for, I think almost 8 months. Kind of hit head with that, where she just felt like her energy was dropping. And I think she could tell the story better than me, but actually the first time she ate meat, she was like, oh my God, like the energy difference was just a game changer. But very clean eating, extremely clean. She was carrying around a bag of Thorne supplements with her on every vacation we went on. And that carried over into what I was doing. So I think at that point in our lives, pre-kids, and it was still just us in solo practice and a pretty small operation. We just, our health was the biggest priority, and we were doing everything we possibly could. The one thing that we wanted to happen wasn't happening. So we actually sought out the advice of a reproductive endocrinologist at the cajoling of Sloan's OBGYN. So remember, we went to this visit. This is a Harvard trained, MD, and she had a lot of great questions and wanted to basically, because of painful menses with Sloan, wanted to do some tests for endometriosis, which anybody that has dealt with this knows that literally the test is a surgery. They're going to go in and look for endometriosis. And if they go in and find it, sometimes they want to go in and do an ablation surgery or, knock out some of that scar tissue. Sloan also found she had some, anomalies within her, the way that her ovary was kind of formed and how it's going to allow for implantation of the egg and things like that. But we were about ready to pull the trigger on this kind of preliminary or exploratory surgery for Sloan. We did at-home testing. This is actually pretty interesting. So for my numbers, they wanted to do it in clinic. And then we found this, it literally is a microscope that attaches to your iPhone that has a 98% sensitivity specificity for basically sperm rates. Which is really cool, and did that, and my stuff checked out okay. So we were kind of like checking that box. And then we did one more round back to our functional medicine physician, Dr. Lee St. Petrie. And she said, Sloan, your thyroid numbers aren't pathologically low, but they're not ideal either. So let's just put you on a little, I can't remember at that time if it was Natrethroid or Synthroid, what it was, but I think 65 milligrams, maybe even lower than that. We were pregnant within 2 months. So here I was doing all of these crazy health things. Sloan's doing all the extremes. She was cutting way down on all of, her athletic endeavors, trying to just make it as amenable as possible to having a baby. And it literally came down to what I would say is a very common medication and presentation for a lot of people that are probably facing this, because your thyroid is a master regulator of a lot of hormonal activities throughout your body. So lo and behold, this low dose thyroid medication, just like that, which would have been, around maybe summer of 2019. And then our daughter Maddox was born in 2020. So it was interesting for me to kind of look at like, God, we thought we were doing everything we knew how to do. And then here it kind of almost goes back to traditional medicine that make sure that we're looking at, well, I'd say it plays on the edge. The traditional medicine aspect came from the prescription medication. The actual functional medicine play was what? She wasn't in pathologic norms. It was just, it was inside the norms, but it was on the low end. So this wasn't optimized. And that's what I was trying to go after during this stage of life, was optimization of health. And, little did we know that the optimization needed to occur with Sloan in just a very specific manner. So we were blessed. So we figured out that, and she still takes thyroid medication to this day and gets her numbers checked. And so maybe there'll be more to talk about on if we have upcoming, any more children and things like that, and maybe any other struggles or not. We were dealing with this, infertility scenario and pregnancy. And I actually remember we took a trip to my mom's house, which is in Illinois. Someone would have been pregnant during this time. So this would have been the summer, summer 2019. And while we're there, I'm heavy into this breathing thing. I remember Sloan and I recorded a podcast on sunscreen on my mom's patio out by the pool. And I'm hot and heavy in this breathing thing. And my mom's asking me about it. And she's telling me she has a pulmonology appointment the following, in the next couple of days. And she's talking about the typical tests that you would do for, pulmonology visit, like an FEV1 or a forced exhalation volume. So you blow into the tube and see how much air you can push out, which is actually a terrible test. And then they base almost everything off of this simple FEV1 test, which is just kind of silly. But I was like, well, how long can you hold your breath for? Because my mom's always been a water aficionado, grew up around the ocean, loves the ocean. I think she talks to whales. So I was like, how long can you hold your breath? We're in the pool. And she goes, and she tries, I think it was I want to say it was 20 seconds or definitely under 30 seconds. As anybody knows that does breath work, you can change that really fast. And that may be, transient, but we work on it. She can hold her breath for almost 2 minutes. And she's blown away because she's like, my physician says that this stuff shouldn't be able to change. And, I try to explain all of this is, a lot of it's centrally mediated and learned behavior. And sure, you have changes, at the tissue level and the pulmonary level, but maybe that's not the whole picture. And I said, hey, can I go with you to your pulmonology visit? She said, sure. But she gave me the caveat. She's like, you have to keep quiet. Like, she knows I'm a bit of an aggressive person in those scenarios especially as my family member. And I think, the best information isn't being laid out, but it's a respect thing too. So I was like, sure. So I go to this pulmonology visit. The attending physician that my mom saw was not that much older than me, maybe not at all. Comes in and I'm just sitting in the corner. My mom introduces me and then goes about her business. Well, my mom on this trip, the reason she was going to the pulmonologist was she sounded like Marge Simpson. She had a very raspy voice. They had changed the corticosteroid inhaler that she was taking daily. And I think she took it a couple times a day. She definitely took it a couple times a day because they had reduced how many times she was taking it to try to reduce the larynx irritation. When it wasn't reducing that, and she was hoarse as all get out. Side story, my mom used to be a fantastic singer, and due to all the medications and things she's done over the years, she can't sing at all now. So the pulmonologist decides to pull the trigger on a visit and say, hey, let's just see what's going on here. So they bring her in and they just, talk about the symptoms. And my mom's telling them, I can't, I'm having to drink water all the time. My throat's scratchy. Like, it definitely started when I started taking this. And the physician literally just says, well, to be able to prescribe the medication I want to put you on, we're going to have to change your diagnosis from asthma to COPD to be able to allow me to prescribe it, which I kind of had an issue with. I get from the insurance billing standpoint that you have to do stuff like that. So I wasn't up in arms. So I was like, it's kind of interesting that we're just going to throw around diagnosis, in particular with what could happen in the future with that. Then she proceeds to pull out it actually was on the inside of the cabinet door, a laminated sheet of, I think it was like 16 different medications that had pictures of the medications. And she goes, oh, we've tried that. We've tried that. We've tried that. We've tried that. Okay, we're going to try this one. Like it was a Chinese menu, and says, hey, we're going to try this one. And my mom's like, well, what is that? She goes, well, it's a different form of corticosteroid. The delivery agent's different. It should be less harsh on, your throat. Mom says, great. And a corticosteroid is usually used to do what? Reduce an inflammatory scenario. So my mom and I had talked about this prior, and I had keyed her up on maybe something to ask if this was the case. They're just going to throw another steroid at her, or something like inhaled steroid. And we talked about how asthma really is not an inflammatory scenario, right? It's an autonomic dysfunction, and it can be made worse by inflammatory scenarios, like things that would be in the environment, things that you're eating. But it is not an inflammatory scenario. And I looked up numerous research articles and was showing my mom and kind of had these stored. Well, then my mom asked the physician, is this an inflammatory thing? She goes, well, yeah, you have asthma, it's inflammatory. And I just couldn't hold it. And I go, what do you mean? Because asthma is not inflammatory. So we went through this whole thing, and she was very nice about it and kind of just asked, well, who are you? And we had a discussion. She was just like, well, this is the medication we have to use because you can't just let the symptoms run amok, which I agree with. But it's really, you just kind of see that like, this is not an end game play. It's just, we're going to keep throwing stuff at her, suppress symptoms. Well, while they're suppressing symptoms of asthma and COPD per their diagnostic criteria to get the medication they need, my mom's been having, started with osteopenia, then osteoporosis, did the typical medications, goes outside of typical medications, starts having to go on injections, and now is looking at having to start doing infusions because her osteoporosis is so severe, and she actually had a femoral neck stress fracture while she was on a trip in Rome. So now we have this kind of, my mom's not the most active person, so I'm not going to blame it purely on inhaled corticosteroids, but we know from the evidence that there is a huge correlation, if not causation, to inhaled corticosteroids over a lifetime, leading to advanced osteopenia and porosis. Tangent that gets off my health journey into my mom's, but it ties back into me because I'm seeing, hey, I was doing all this high level health optimization stuff. It came back through a more of a traditional play for Sloan and I to get pregnant. My mom's playing over here in the sandbox of completely traditional medicine and getting worse in almost every aspect of her health, not completely because of the treatment, also her own accord, which is very frustrating. But, I'm just kind of having all of these things floating around me while I'm still trying to figure out, like, should I be worried about these decreasing white blood cell counts? Should I stop running like I am? I'm trying to moderate my stress levels and my health as best I can. And I feel fine at this time, but I'm seeing blood markers and things still aren't great. So this all kind of comes to not a head, but where I was just kind of like, okay, I'm going to take a big pause. And this pause was catalyzed by the fact that I did a TED Talk in 2019, which would have been just prior to us getting pregnant. And if anybody's done a TED Talk, there's a ton of prep, a lot of time that goes into it. The actual event itself was stressful. So there was a lot of stress around that. And my talk, though, was on this environmental reflection. A short talk, just more on the environmental side, but tying in our personal health and our environmental health and how, they play off one another in this kind of circular infinitesimal pattern. And I just kind of got to thinking, like, maybe it's not all the fancy health optimization, biohacking stuff. Like, maybe I should just get back to like bare bones stuff, not worry too much. Like, if I'm eating healthy, I'm sleeping well, which having a kid threw that off. I'm exercising, I can manage my stress. Like, that's fine. I don't have to go do all these crazy things, spend hundreds of dollars on supplements, put coffee up my butt, stuff like that. Cool. And that's what I went with. And that just, it was kind of a weird time in my life when, like I said, I should have been, and maybe I was, and maybe the blood work is, doesn't run parallel to how I was feeling, but I mean, I was, crushing races. I think during this time, I can't remember what year I went and did, I ran the Rut, which is a 50K up in Montana. And prior to the Rut, my friend and I, Zach Andrews, went and ran lower and middle Teton, ran a couple mountains leading up to that, and then went and ran this 50K, which absolutely destroyed me. But I was doing things that like I felt like I was in fantastic shape and, no issues that I was seeing. But just still interesting how possibly I could be doing all these great things. My health is somewhat declining, which leads me back to the whole reason to do this podcast is, this podcast is just an examination of my process that I'm still trying to figure out. And this is what I talked about in my last wild health visit with, my functional med doc now, was should I be worried about what my blood markers and panels are telling me, or should I go more off of how I feel? And kind of the feedback was, to a certain extent, you got to pay attention to this stuff because it can be preempting bigger things. But at the same token, we know that there's, this wild health thing is more of a precision medicine take, which is a genomics look, blood markers, history, symptomatology, putting it all together and kind of being like, well, who are you and what do lab values say over how you're actually, managing and handling daily life and how do you feel? And, not to jump ahead in time to today specifically, but I can tell you like whether it's, our practice is growing. We have a 2.5-year-old now. All these things are coming at me. Like, I don't feel like I'm on top of it like I was. And I don't want to be the person that blames that on age or anything. I just think I'm still trying to figure out how to manage my health best. And, I don't do everything perfect by a long shot, but I'm trying to figure out what are those biggest dominoes, which I'm always trying to find for people in my office or virtual consult clients or functional health clients of, what should you be focused on instead of doing all of these things? And maybe 90% of what you're doing is actually fluff, sometimes maybe even deleterious to your health process. So yeah, that was, my time period in life from like 2018 up to having our daughter, it was just kind of an interesting one. And then, my health journey is going to be aimed at, if I pull up my, I'm going to actually go back to college. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, a time in my life when I wasn't concerned with my health. I was healthy, but I wasn't paying attention to it. And, just some interesting things that were going on around then. And maybe that everything stacks up over time. But just kind of how we look at health as maybe a Western mindset, in particular when you don't have any problems, and just kind of how you treat it like a grain of sand when it's really the most valuable thing you'll ever have. So I hope you guys are getting some out of this. If anything, for me, it's I guess it's talking therapy, talking to this camera and kind of telling the story. But hopefully it brings up questions for people, allows you to direct. Just like my mom and her visit, direct questions at or towards your practitioners or your health coaches or whoever you're working with or yourself, and start asking questions of, what matters most, what should I be working on, and how do I go about figuring that out? And I'll see you guys next time when we go back to college. See ya.